Picture the scene: a packed ice rink in Toronto, the rafters shaking from roaring fans, and the home team down a goal. Out skates a towering figure, 6 feet 5 inches and built like a freight train, scanning the opposition with a look that says, "Don't even try it." The crowd goes wild. They know that a single shift from this man might change the entire night, whether by throwing his body around, dropping the gloves to fire everyone up, or simply flashing that irrepressible grin that says he's ready for anything. That, in a nutshell, was Wade Belak, a larger-than-life presence who could go from punishing hits on the ice to charming banter off it in a heartbeat. Belak was born on July 3, 1976, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, under the name Wade William Audland. He was 4 years old when his mother remarried, and the child took his new stepdad's surname, Belak. From that moment on, Wade's path had a few intriguing twists and turns. While some future NHLers spend their childhood meticulously charting every step to reach the big leagues, young Wade's ambitions were more varied. Hockey, of course, was front and center, particularly enforcer-style hockey, as he'd eventually become known for, but he also dreamed of firefighting and even planned to become a lifeguard by 14. Growing up in the Great White North, he had two big role models: the fearlessness of on-ice warriors and the heroism of first responders. Maybe that mix of guardian angel and force of nature was always in his DNA. He officially burst onto the junior hockey scene with the Saskatoon Blades in the Western Hockey League, WHL. Imagine a raw 16-year-old towering over many of his peers, but still figuring out the nuance of the game. In 1992 to 93, he only got into 7 games, notching no points but racking up 23 penalty minutes, just a small taste of what his fists and physical presence would bring. The following year, he stepped into a full-time role, and the stats told a story of a kid who relished physical play. 4 goals, 17 points, and 226 penalty minutes. Yikes, that was only the beginning. In 1994 to 95, those PIMs ballooned to 290, the 4th highest in the WHL. We can practically see him squaring off at center ice, gloves hitting the floor before the linesman can even say, "Break it up." So, it's not surprising that NHL scouts took notice. Sure, his offensive numbers might not have screamed future superstar, but Wade's size and grit were a hot commodity in mid-90s hockey. The Quebec Nordiques snagged him 12th overall in the 1994 NHL entry draft. Yes, 12th overall. That's how valuable an enforcer with potential was in that era. The Nordiques were on the cusp of relocating to Colorado, so Belak's introduction to professional hockey would coincide with a franchise that was about to become the mighty Avalanche. If you were an enforcer back then, you were walking into a league that sometimes felt like the Wild West on skates. Bench-clearing brawls might not have been as common as in the 70s or 80s, but dropping the gloves was still a regular feature, and guys like Belak were expected to police the ice. He officially debuted in the NHL on December 21, 1996, suiting up for the Colorado Avalanche against, funnily enough, Toronto, the team that would later embrace him as a folk hero. Early on, he only played a handful of games, often heading back down to the Hershey Bears in the AHL. There, his penalty minutes soared, hitting 320 in 65 games one season. You can just imagine him rolling up his sleeves night after night, policing the entire rink as if to say, "Don't mess with my teammates." The Avalanche gave him occasional spots, but it's tough to break in on a team that boasted legends like Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg, not to mention the more established tough guys. In total, Belak only skated in 35 regular season games with Colorado, notching a single goal and assist, along with 109 penalty minutes. His first NHL goal, scored on October 22, 1997, in a gritty 4-3 win against Washington. A glimpse of offensive contribution, though everyone knew scoring wasn't the main reason Wade Belak got called to the show. Then came a shakeup. On February 28, 1999, the Avalanche traded Belak to the Calgary Flames in a package that brought Theoren Fleury the other way. Suddenly, Wade found himself with a fresh start in Cowtown, sporting the Flaming C. Calgary fans loved their scrappy players, and Belak fit right in, amassing 224 PIMs across 72 games with the Flames. Over the next 2 seasons, he struggled with injuries, like a shoulder issue that sidelined him for 6 weeks. and with finding a consistent role on the team. He toggled between the AHL's St. John Flames and the big squad, never truly nailing down a permanent spot. But when he did play, oh boy, did the fists fly. One storyline from that period involved him being suspended for a high stick on Ozzy Vananen, an incident that would prove that behind Belak's goofy grin was a readiness to shift into tough guy mode the second the gloves came off. Then, in 2001, as if fate wanted to reunite him with the city he first laced up against, Belak was claimed off waivers by the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is where the saga really hits its stride. Toronto, a hockey-crazed market with fans who adore big personalities, latched onto Belak like he was the personal bodyguard they'd always wanted. He became an instant fan favorite, going from an unknown to the Intimidator, a nickname that fit him like a glove, or, ironically, like a glove he was always dropping on the ice. Leafs fans admired guys who put their bodies on the line for the team, especially in that era, and Belak did exactly that. He'd also flash a big toothy grin in post-game interviews, and fans realized he wasn't just a brute. He was one of the funniest dudes in the dressing room. In 318 games with the Leafs, plus 13 in the playoffs, Wade tallied 7 goals and 17 assists, far from eye-popping on a stats sheet. But no one was measuring his performance by goals and assists. They measured it in how many times he stuck up for a star player, or gave the ACC crowd a jolt with a spirited fight, or flattened an opponent at the blue line. And wow, were there fights. He tangled with some of the toughest enforcers in the league, from Cam Janssen to, yes again, Vananen. One of his more famous altercations was a 2007 tilt against Janssen that had both guys throwing bombs until the linesman intervened. He was also suspended in 2004 for another slash on Vananen, a feud that apparently never cooled. And through it all, Toronto fans still chanted his name. Wade Belak had arrived. He also got involved in broadcasting, popping up on Leafs TV for comedic segments and occasionally jumping behind the mic. It turns out that intangible comedic gift he had in the locker room translated well to TV. He was approachable, self-deprecating, and not afraid to poke fun at himself or the sport. Even DJs at The Edge 102.1 in Toronto recognized his radio potential, and he proved as entertaining off the ice as on it. So, if you went to see the Leafs and Belak was playing, you might catch a scrap. If you turned on the radio and Belak was speaking, you might hear a joke. He was always multidimensional like that. Eventually, the Leafs traded him to the Florida Panthers on February 26, 2008, for a 5th-round pick. Suddenly, Belak in a sunny climate was the new vibe. He only got into 17 games that season and another 15 the next before being flipped to Nashville. In total, his Florida tenure was short-lived. 32 games, 0 points, 37 penalty minutes. It was a transitional stop on his hockey journey, and maybe fans in the Sunshine State never quite caught on to the full Wade Belak phenomenon the way Toronto had. But no matter. Soon he was packing his bags again. Nashville turned out to be a place where Belak found a genuine second home. The Predators were developing a strong community identity, and their fans loved big personalities nearly as much as Leafs fans did. He arrived in November 2008 in exchange for Nick Tarnasky and quickly made his presence known. Though he only dressed for 53 regular season games over a few seasons, the big man earned the respect of his teammates and the local crowd. He wasn't scoring goals. 2 assists in 2008-09 was as good as it got offensively. But who cared? The city of Nashville is no stranger to showmanship, and Belak could bring the show in a more physical sense. When the time came to drop the gloves, the Bridgestone Arena lit up. However, by 2010-11, injuries and general wear and tear were catching up. He struggled with pelvic arthritis, making it tough to stay in the lineup. On February 25, 2011, he was placed on waivers and assigned to the AHL's Milwaukee Admirals. Within days, on March 8, 2011, he decided to retire. At 6 feet 5 inches, 222 pounds, with 136 recorded fights in his NHL history, Wade's body had taken a pounding. But it also opened a new door. Retirement gave him a chance to explore broadcasting and community roles, something that felt like a natural evolution for a guy who was always so comfortable in front of a microphone. Fans who'd come to love him as a brawler might have been surprised to see him so animated and relaxed on air. He hosted segments on Nashville radio station, 104.5 the zone. The format let him be exactly who he was at his best. Funny, laid back, a bit mischievous, but also deeply insightful about the game. People started calling him a hidden gem, someone who could have a long future in sports media. He was also lined up to be part of CBC's Battle of the Blades, an ice dancing show that pairs hockey players with figure skaters for charity. In typical Belak fashion, he was dedicating his performance to a cause linked to one of his daughters. He wanted to skate, raise money, and create comedic moments all at once, a trifecta of Belakness. But beneath that ever-present smile lay a more complicated reality. Wade had reportedly been on antidepressants for about 4 years, and while most of his friends and teammates saw him as the life of the party, he was grappling with something deeper. The enforcer role in the NHL, for all its visceral excitement, can be brutal on one's mental health. There's a certain weight to knowing your job is to protect others, to take hits, to fight, to risk your body every shift. You train to be fearless on the outside, but inside, the injuries, physical and psychological, may accumulate. In the summer of 2011, the hockey world was already reeling from the deaths of Derek Boogaard in May from an overdose, and Rick Rypien in August from suicide. These were enforcers too, fueling whispers about a deeper problem with how the NHL handled mental well-being for its toughest players. On August 31st, 2011, just as he was settling into post-hockey life, tragedy struck. Wade Belak was found dead in his condo at the 1 King Street West Hotel in Toronto. He was 35 years old. The Toronto police would rule it a suicide by hanging, shocking everyone who had spoken with him just days, sometimes hours, earlier. Friends recalled receiving upbeat text messages and voicemails, planning future events, or finalizing a broadcast schedule. His wife, Jennifer, learned of his death in the most ordinary moment possible, picking up their 2 daughters, Andy and Alex, from school. That heartbreak was unimaginable for those close to him, especially given the positive front he'd always displayed. An autopsy revealed that Belak had signs of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, the degenerative brain disease linked to repeated hits to the head. His wife would later connect the dots. All those fights, collisions, and the intangible pressure to keep getting back up took a toll beyond what anyone could see. For a league that still idolized big hits and big enforcers, it was an uncomfortable wake-up call. You can't watch a brawl break out in hockey the same way once you consider the toll it might have on a person's brain and emotional state. Wade's passing put him at the center of a painful trifecta of enforcer deaths that summer, raising urgent questions about the mental health support provided to players. Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner, and Don Fair from the NHL Players Association promised reviews of player welfare and more robust mental health programs. Yet, for all the official statements, fans and teammates were left with a profound sense of loss. This was a man who had lit up the room with jokes, who played the tough guy role on the ice, but never let that define him off it. Hearing the news that he had died by suicide made it clear that appearances could be deeply misleading, even for someone as seemingly carefree as Belak. Across the hockey world, tributes poured in from Calgary, Toronto, Nashville, and beyond. Blake Jeffrian and Jordan Tutu spoke about his humor and big heart. Flames, Leafs, and Predators organizations released statements honoring him. On social media, former teammates, fans, and analysts recounted stories of him going out of his way to help rookies, or cracking an entire locker room up during a stressful playoff run. The tributes weren't just about a fearsome competitor. They were about a genuinely kind soul, the funniest guy in the room, who also might have been the most wounded on the inside. Belak's family life had also been a big part of who he was. Married to Jennifer in Banff, Alberta, back in 2002, he adored his daughters. Jennifer described him as a devoted father who made sure to spend his free time playing silly games or sharing inside jokes with the kids. It's the kind of detail that underscores just how out of nowhere his death felt to outsiders. Here was a man who seemed to have everything going for him: 2 beautiful daughters, comedic talents, a promising broadcast career, and the admiration of fans everywhere. But the swirl of depression and potential CTE can overshadow any outward success. His younger brother, Graham, had also played hockey, drafted by Colorado in 1997, though he never cracked the NHL. Graham eventually pursued a career in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The Belak family thus found itself etched into the sports world's consciousness for reasons that no family should have to endure. Jennifer emerged over time as an advocate for CTE awareness, giving interviews and supporting studies that might help other players avoid Wade's fate. In time, the hockey community tried to glean lessons from Belak's story, as well as from Bugard and Rypien's tragedies. More open discussions about mental health began to occur in the NHL. Some enforcers who were still active started speaking publicly about the emotional burden of having to fight constantly, understanding that protecting the team might also mean sacrificing your own well-being. Although there has been debate about how much the league truly changed in the wake of these events, it's undeniable that Wade Belak's death was one of the catalysts that forced the league and fans to confront the human cost behind those roars of approval when a fight breaks out on the ice. One of the most poignant tributes came from fans. Toronto Maple Leafs faithful, who once bellowed, "Belak, Belak," after his infrequent but joyous goals, turned to social media and local radio to express their grief. Nashville fans, known for forging tight bonds with their players, also grieved publicly, sharing stories of meeting him at a community event or hearing him crack jokes at an autograph signing. Indeed, this was a man who had touched many corners of the hockey universe. He'd never been a scoring champion or a top-line star, but some players don't need the points to earn an unbreakable bond with fans. Belak was that kind of player, someone who fought for the crest on his jersey and spread laughter off the ice.